In 1974, author Peter Benchley published Jaws, a novel about a great white shark terrorising the fictional Long Island beach town of Amity. A year later, this was turned into a hit film of the same name, which captivated audiences and resulted in a generation being terrified of what was lurking below the waves. However, this tale of fiction was inspired by real events, which were much more terrifying, and which occurred over the space of 12 days in July 1916, when a shark attacked 5 people off the coast of the state of New Jersey. Only one survived. 3 of these attacks occurred in the space of just an hour and a half. This is a case which shows the truth is stranger than fiction, and reality is often more terrifying than fantasy. Welcome to Tales of Tragedy. Today, we travel back almost 110 years to the summer of 1916 and to the state of New Jersey in the northeastern United States. During this year there was a heat wave, and this led to more people than usual travelling to the 141 miles of ocean front which makes up the Jersey Shore, running from Perth Amboy in the north to Cape Mayport in the south. Thousands of people were swimming the ocean each day to get some relief from the heat. However, there were then, and still are, dangers in the water, and it's common either seasonally or all year round to find various shark species in the waters off the Jersey coast, including 3 of the most dangerous species to human beings: the great white, the tiger shark, and the bull shark. Shark attacks are actually extremely rare. The International Wildlife Museum recently put the odds of being killed in a shark attack as roughly 1 in 3.7 million. However, despite these stats, in the space of just 12 days in July 1916, 4 people would suffer gruesome deaths, falling victim to one of nature's oldest predators. At around 6:15 p.m. on Saturday the 1st of July 1916, Charles Epting Van Sant was enjoying a weekend away at Beach Haven, a resort off the southern coast of New Jersey. He was born in Philadelphia and was a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania before finding work as a broker with Philadelphia's Stillwell brothers brokerage firm. Some reports state that he was 28, but his gravestone cites his year of birth as 1892, and so this makes him 23 at the time of his death. He, like many, were trying to escape the scorching heat, and so had travelled down with his family the day before and was staying at the Ingleside Hotel. Charles decided to have a quick swim in the sea and took the family dog with him, a Chesapeake Bay retriever. Both man and dog dived in, but the dog soon paddled back to shore. Undeterred, Charles went to deeper water and after swimming for a few minutes, decided to return back to land. There were plenty of people on the beach, and it's reported they noticed a large, triangular fin following Charles as he swam. When he was around 14 metres from shore, the shark attacked, biting into Charles's left thigh. He began to scream and flail his arms, and some on the shore believed he was calling for his dog, but then they noticed the sea turning red, and they saw a thrashing behind Charles, as well as flashes of a body and a tail. Lifeguards bravely dived in to save Charles, and this included an Olympic swimmer called Alexander Ott. He got hold of Charles and began to drag him back to shore. Some reports suggested that the shark still had its jaws locked around his leg, and only let go when they were a few feet away from the shore. Charles was pulled out of the water and put on the beach, and the true horror of his injuries was clear. The flesh and muscle from Charles's left thigh had been completely ripped away, severing his femoral artery. Charles was bleeding profusely and lost consciousness within seconds of being brought back onto the beach. Medical help was summoned, and Charles was carried back to the Ingleside Hotel and put on the hotel manager's desk. The nearest hospital was 30 miles away, and it was clear that Charles would not survive, and he soon died from blood loss, lying on the table. His body was taken back to Philadelphia for burial in South Laurel Hill Cemetery. Word spread quickly about a fatal shark attack. However, it was clear that business owners were concerned about losing the summer trade, and so they played down what had happened. Soon, the ridiculous story that Charles had been attacked by a turtle began to circulate. None of the beaches along the coast were closed in the aftermath of the tragedy, and as a result, just 5 days later, someone else would lose their life. 40 miles north of Beach Haven, lies the town of Spring Lake and the Essex and Sussex Hotel. In 1916, this was one of the most luxurious hotels, not only in the state of New Jersey, but in the whole country. It's where President William Taft delivered a speech and stayed in 1914. On the afternoon of Thursday the 6th of July 1916, 28-year-old bellhop Charles Bruder was working and decided to have a swim on his break. I haven't been able to find a picture of Charles, but he's described as a tall, well-built man who was very athletic and a good swimmer. He was a Swiss national and had served in the Swiss Army. Why he ended up in the US is unclear. Charles entered the water at approximately 2 p.m. and swam to around 120 metres from the shore. A woman then saw what she thought was a man in a red canoe tipped over in the water. However, soon, others saw Charles being thrown into the air by a shark, again and again. His death-curdling screams could be heard a quarter of a mile away. 2 lifeguards, Chris Anderson and George White, rowed to Charles in a lifeboat, and as they approached, he spoke his final words, telling them, quote, "A shark bit me, bit my legs off." And all was extended to Charles, with him using the last of his strength to pull himself into the boat. What the lifeguards saw horrified them, and I have no doubt stayed with them for the rest of their lives. Both of Charles's legs were gone, bitten off. His left leg was taken off below the knee, his right leg above. Charles bled to death within minutes, and was dead by the time the boat was rowed back to the shore. It's reported that people screamed and fainted when Charles's mutilated body was laid out on the beach. Charles Bruder was buried in Atlantic View Cemetery in Manasquan. Guests and staff of the Essex and Sussex and other hotels raised money to send to his grieving family in Switzerland. This second attack led to several hotels closing down, as well as national attention. The number of sunbathers declined by 75%, and only a few would dare enter the water. On July the 8th, armed residents began patrolling the beaches around Spring Lake. However, despite this, just 6 days later, 2 more would lose their lives, and the sharks' hunting ground would move from the open ocean to an inland creek 30 miles north of where Charles Bruder died. At 2 p.m. on Wednesday the 12th of July 1916, 11-year-old Lester Stillwell was running with his friends down Main Street in the town of Matawan, which lies 30 miles north of the last attack site at Spring Lake. Unlike Spring Lake, Matawan lies a mile and a half inland, so the residents inevitably thought they were safe from the horror occurring across the coast. In order to cool off, the residents of the town would swim in the Matawan Creek. However, this flows into Raritan Bay, and then, eventually, into the Atlantic Ocean. This is where Lester was going with his friends. He'd been working with his father William at Anderson Bag Factory, and, due to the heat, William had given his son time off to go swimming with his friends. They stripped naked and entered the water at Wyckoff Dock area. Little did they know, a dangerous predator had also entered the creek. Half an hour earlier, at 1:30 p.m, a retired sea captain called Captain Thomas Cotterill was walking over a bridge which spanned the creek, and he happened to look into the water, and he could not believe what he saw. He initially spotted the dorsal fin of a shark, and when his eyes adjusted, he saw the outline of its body, which he estimated to be around 9 feet in length, so almost 3 meters. The shark was gliding silently inland, up the creek, heading in the direction of the Wyckoff Dock area. Thomas went into town to warn everyone, but his talk about a shark in the creek were put down to hysteria, a combination of the heat and the panic that was sweeping the coastal towns due to the recent shark attacks. The boys were jumping into the creek, climbing out, and then doing the same thing again. They were having a great time. Lester swam to a deeper part of the creek and was lying on his back floating on the water. He was proud of this because he was quite a sickly child and often had trouble keeping his head above the surface. He shouted, quote, "Hey fellas, watch me float." As the boys turned, to their horror, they saw a shark surge towards Lester, apparently coming from nowhere. Lester was attacked from his left-hand side, with the shark apparently biting into his leg, or potentially higher, into his stomach area. Lester tried to fight against the shark, but it was futile. He screamed and was dragged underwater as the creek turned red with his blood. Lester's friends scrambled out of the creek and ran naked back into town. They entered the tailor shop of 24-year-old Stanley Fisher and began screaming that Lester had been eaten by a shark. Stanley was a strong man, described later as a natural leader, and he didn't hesitate. He enlisted the help of 2 friends and went to the creek. By this point, a large crowd had gathered, and they watched as Stanley jumped in and began diving under the water. At this point, Lester hadn't been seen for half an hour. He was inevitably dead, so it was just a case of retrieving his body. Stanley eventually, through the gloom, saw Lester's body at the bottom of the creek and managed to hook it with his arms and come to the surface. The crowd were horrified, seeing the mangled body of a little boy, but even more so when they saw the shark emerge and attack Stanley. This caused him to drop Lester's body, and the water began to turn red as the shark ripped into the flesh of Stanley's left thigh. Stanley was dragged under and re-emerged several times, all whilst he fought the shark with all of his strength. 2 men in a boat rowed to join in the desperate struggle and began hitting the shark with oars until it let go and swam away. Stanley was then pulled ashore, and the flesh from his left thigh was completely bitten away, and this had severed his femoral artery. He looked at the wound and said, quote, "Oh my God." A doctor arrived on scene and applied a tourniquet, and a makeshift stretcher was created to carry Stanley to Matawan train station to put him on a train to the nearest hospital, which was Monmouth Memorial Hospital in Long Branch. Stanley was attacked at around 2:30 p.m. and managed to stay conscious for the whole journey, but just before he was going to go into surgery at 5:30 p.m, so around 3 hours after the attack, he died from massive blood loss. Stanley Fisher was clearly a hero and a very brave man, but his efforts to save Lester were in vain. His body was eventually recovered 2 days later, around 50 metres from the site of the attack. Both Stanley and Lester were laid to rest at Rose Hill Cemetery in Matawan. Unfortunately, this was not the end of the horror. When the shark swam away after attacking Stanley Fisher, it didn't go far. Less than a mile from Wyckoff Dock, still within Matawan Creek, was the New Jersey Clay Company Brickyards. In the water outside this complex, 14-year-old Joseph Dunn, his brother, and several of their friends were swimming. Suddenly a group ran towards them and warned them that a shark had just attacked 2 people down the creek. The time was around 3 p.m, just half an hour after the attack on Stanley and around an hour after Lester Stillwell was killed. The boys panicked and scrambled for the ladder to get out of the creek. As Joseph got to the ladder and began to climb out of the water, the shark emerged and latched onto his left leg, stripping it of flesh and dragging him back into the water. Joseph later said that he felt his leg go down the shark's throat, with him saying, quote, "I believe it would have swallowed me." Joseph's brother and friend courageously jumped back into the water and grabbed hold of him and were in a tug-of-war with the shark. They knew if Joseph was dragged under the water, he would die. Eventually the shark let go and Joseph was pulled out of the creek. His leg was mangled and he was bleeding profusely, but luckily for him, it seemed the shark had not bitten through any major arteries. However, it was still touch and go. Joseph was driven by a car to St. Peter's Hospital in New Brunswick, where doctors managed to stem the bleeding. He spent 2 months in hospital and had to have skin grafts to cover his injuries. However, not only did Joseph survive, he was able to keep his leg. Joseph Dunn was the last victim and the only survivor of the 1960 New Jersey shark attacks. This brought to an end a period of terror that lasted just 12 days, but held the entire coastal community of New Jersey in the grip of fear. Understandably, the townspeople wanted revenge, but the response was over the top to say the least. The hysteria that gripped the people who lived around the area of the attacks was later replicated in the film Jaws, with anyone and everyone descending on the scene to hunt the man-eating shark. This was in part because people wanted to collect the reward money that's been offered, but more than this, people wanted revenge. Men, women and children lined the banks of the Matawan Creek, pointing shotguns into the water and shooting at any dark shadow they thought might be a shark. The creek was a mass of boats with men throwing dynamite into the water, hoping to blow the shark to kingdom come. Unfortunately, this did little more than killing thousands of fish. Along the coast, hundreds of sharks were caught and killed. This included various species that were harmless and clearly too small to be the shark described by eyewitnesses. On July the 14th, 1916, 2 days after the last attack, a taxidermist called Michael Schleiser and his friends were in a motorboat in Raritan Bay at the mouth of Matawan Creek. They had a net in the water trying to catch fish when something became caught in the net. They saw it was a shark, which was fighting furiously to escape. It almost pulled the boat underwater, but the pair were able to beat the shark to death with a broken oar and tow the body back to shore. The shark they caught was a young great white. The length of the shark varies in different reports, but it was between 7.5 and 9 feet in length, so 2.3 to 2.7 metres, and weighed around 325 pounds, or almost 150 kilos. It was reported the shark was cut open, and 15 pounds, or around 6 kilos of human remains, were found in its stomach. The capture of the man-eating shark made headlines around the world. Michael had the shark stuffed and took it to New York City, where people paid to view it. What happened to the shark is not known. So was this the shark that killed 4 people in the space of just 12 days? It needs to be pointed out that the claims about human remains being found in the shark's stomach are unverified. Potentially, this was a story concocted by hotel owners trying to get trade back to the area. There's been debate for decades about whether this was the right shark, with many experts stating this was unlikely to be the right animal. They cite the fact that the last attacks occurred in freshwater, which great white sharks tend to avoid because their bodies need salt to survive. However, bull sharks have no such issue and are actually considered by many experts to be more dangerous than their more famous cousins due to their aggressive nature and the fact they're commonly found near highly populated areas. The size also matches witness accounts. Female bull sharks can grow up to 11 feet in length. But others have pointed out that Matawan Creek is a tidal creek and that at high tide a lot of salt water flows in from the sea, so potentially the environment was perfect for a great white. Unfortunately, we'll never know for sure. The events of those 12 terrifying days in 1916 have long slipped into history, but there is a memorial for Lester Stillwell and Stanley Fisher, which was unveiled in 2016, which is located near the site of the attacks, which took their lives. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also, feel free to check out my second channel, called Evil Among Us, which focuses on true crime. I'll put a link in the description. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.